I think we should go ahead and get started now. So everyone, welcome to our monthly MOPAG meeting. I'm Steve Reed, the co-chair, along with Susan Turk. This meeting is being recorded and can be accessed in a few days at mopag.net. Today we're going to discuss ranked choice voting, and we will also get an update on redistricting that Ron Zager had asked for, and other people are interested in, of course. So let's have Christina give us the treasurer report.
Okay, our bank balance as of today is $1,207.12, and we did get one contribution, from last meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. So I'm going to go right to announcements. Do we have any announcements that people want to make?
I'd like to remind people that we're coming up on the new year and to encourage you to renew your membership dues in MOPAG, which I believe are $25. And they can either be contributed through our Act Blue account, or you can send us a check to our post office box, which I will send everyone an email about, because I don't remember the number off the top of my head. If somebody does, please chime in.
22743 is box
That's
number, and it's PO zip code is 63122 Kirkwood. Yeah, was the account.
Emails are good, Susan. My short-term memory is not great.
Okay, it'll come. Thank you, Don.
Okay. Got one more person coming in here, Ellen Wentz. All right. Let's go to the topic of ranked choice voting. Today, I'm very pleased that Austin Brown of the group St. Louis RCV is with us to present and answer your questions. I'd like people to be thinking specifically about whether ranked choice voting is something we want to see here in St. Louis County. You may have seen me mention before that Eric Fay with the St. Louis County Election Board says that the voting machines we have, which I think were new for the 2020 general election, in any event, they're newer machines. They're technologically capable of handling RCV. And at some point, I'd like a show of hands, probably at the end of the discussion, how many people are for, how many against RCV in our county, and how many people are undecided. Okay, so Austin Brown, I'm going to turn things over to you now.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, so I'm just going to share my. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on. I may have blocked that. Okay, try it now, Austin.
There we go. All right. So just a quick presentation that we put together for y'all. So like Steve said, we're St. Louis ranked choice voting. We have our information there if you want to look us up. So let's start with what does our group do? So we're a nonpartisan group, and we mostly deal with the education around ranked choice voting, because as you've probably guessed, not a lot of people know about ranked choice voting. Here's some of our members here. We also work with the Missourians for ranked choice voting and Better Ballot KC. They're all pushing for ranked choice voting. So what is RCV is probably the biggest question most people have, and how will it help? So ranked choice voting, if you look at this, sample ballot we made, basically you're gonna pick your top choice, which is what you would do in a normal election, and then you would choose your preferences down the line. So if you say toasted raviolis are the best thing in St. Louis, but you also like St. Louis frozen custard, you can put St. Louis frozen custard as your second choice, and then maybe you're like pork steaks are definitely on the list, so let's put that at third choice and fourth and fifth and so on. And the way it's counted is you count all of the first choice votes. And if a majority is reached with the first place votes, then it's just a winner. And majority meaning 50% or more. Mathematically, this is how the system works. If you don't have more than 50%, then we go ahead and eliminate the last choice. So let's say just ice cream cones were like the last choice. So that's eliminated. Everyone that put ice cream cones as their first choice, their second choice is now counted, and it's distributed amongst the ballots again. And then once again, it's checked to see if it has 50% or more. If it doesn't, it goes again and goes again until someone has a true majority winner. Okay, so why do we want to deal with a new voting system? Because the current one has lots of problems. As you've probably noticed, we have two major parties. And you can look back to our founding fathers. That is not what they intended for the country. Two major parties causes all kinds of problems. I'm sure you understand that, but that much. And the way this happens is due to some of the other effects of our voting system. And that has to do with, main thing is that you don't need 50% or more to win an election. So that creates things like tactical voting, vote splitting, and the notion of wasting your vote. When you vote for a person, say in our election system, you wanted to vote for a third party because you thought that third party member was the person that should win. But obviously in our system, you don't vote for that person because that's a wasted vote. That vote will never make it. So why vote for them? You should vote for, the closest to the main two. And that's what we call tactical voting. It's also known as vote splitting. Basically, don't give your vote to them because they're not going to win. And there's lots of issues, but we'll come back to that. So these are some elections that happened relatively recently. If you look at who won, you see 48%, you see 41%, 33%, 34%. Here's some more. 48%, 48.6 was Cory Bush. Like, that's pretty high, but still, that's not even a majority of the people that voted. And you see that all along here, like 48% is the highest of the bar. So ranked choice voting, like I said, gets rid of that. It has to be 50% or more. And that's that first bullet point right there. It ensures a majority consensus winners. So may not be your very first choice, but if your second choice gets in there, you're like, oh, okay, that would be good too. That would be a good option too. And some other benefits are it discourages negative campaigning. We've seen that in Maine. If you look at some of the Maine campaign election commercials and whatnot, a lot of them, instead of that person sucks, don't vote for them, you have to vote for me, they do things like, yeah, that person is a good candidate, but I think if you're going to vote for that person, I think you should also vote for me as your second choice, because I have all of these good things that are going for me too. It encouraged them to talk about the issues, not just bashing the other person. And if you look at some of our current, our latest elections, that's all that it is. Like the Virginia election recently, if you look at the campaigning, it's literally this person is exactly Trump and we hate him. And then the other one was he's not Trump and we don't like him because he's not Trump. You know, like that's not what elections are supposed to be about. And like I said, it fights vote splitting. It requires a broad base of support. Ultimately, that means everyone's going to like them. Maybe not like them as their first choice, but they're like, oh, that'll be good. I like that. It's at least it's better than my very last option. So Steve asked me to look up some cons. I obviously am a bit biased. I don't think there are any cons, but possible cons could be that there's a little bit of education lacking around ranked choice voting. People don't know what it is. So that causes its own, struggles. There is the possibility of having more candidates, and people will look around like, that's too much. What am I going to do? That's just a matter of change. I personally feel more candidates is a great thing, but some people might disagree with me. And one note that was brought to me recently was that nationalizing RCV doesn't really, unless you nationalize RCV, the president still ends up being a first past the post or winner take all election. But we have to get it here before we can talk about that. So this is the point I would like any questions on how it works, because that's where I get a lot of my questions. Is there any questions on how it works?
Got one. Does it eliminate primaries?
So it doesn't have to, but effectively you could, because there's no reason you can't have 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 3 Green Party, whatever. There's no reason that we need the party primary, but the parties may feel otherwise. So the option to keep it still stands.
Austin, along those lines, where RCV has been implemented, have they eliminated the primaries? Do you know?
Some have, some haven't. And I actually have a slide on that, how it works in America at least. But we also know that in other places around the world, they do a little bit things like Australia. They call it preferential voting, but they have a different setup also. Yes, Susan?
We just had our first election in this city with what's called approval voting. We can't have ranked choice because our voting machines in the city can't handle it. So we had an approval voting election instead, with the primaries being in March. Normally, the winner of the Democratic primary wins the general election. But what happened this time is with approval voting, the two top vote getters in the Democratic primary then faced off in the general election. And if you have the winner chosen in the primary, generally very few people show up to vote in the general election. And you have, again, somebody who won with less than 50% of the vote in the primary becoming your mayor. What happened this time was because the two top vote getters in the Democratic primary faced off in April, our mayor was elected with more than 50% of the vote. And it turned out to be the same person who won the primary. It's just that this time, because more people had to show up in the general election, she actually ended up winning with more than 50%. And that was the effect we had of it in the city.
All right. I do have a slide on approval voting, comparing them and whatnot. I don't know what your question necessarily is, if that, and maybe that was just like a comment for everyone, but.
It was a comment based on what our local experience is now. Because we can't have ranked choice in the city, what we've done instead and how it impacted us. It's very similar to ranked choice.
Maybe before we go on, I got one more question too. You said, I mean, you put the cons up there, but what I'd also like to know is who is against it? Who is going to be hurt by this? That's my question.
But if that's the question, effectively, I don't know if there's really a person that is hurt by it. I mean, the parties that use gerrymandering to win elections, that use dirty tricks to win elections, that's who it hurts. And I don't necessarily think that's a con.
Right. Sometimes hurting somebody is actually a pro. I just wondered who else it might hurt that, you know, it might like. We might like that happen.
Yeah, it just hurts those candidates that aren't in it for the best intentions. Like I said about the negative campaigning and stuff, it's bad intentions. You're not there to put forward what you're going to do for the people. You're there to beat the other guy, which is not necessarily what we need in general.
Well, some places I've heard have tried this and then gone away from it. So somebody must have not liked it for some reason. Make them go away from it. So, you know, what about those cases?
I don't have those places on hand to specifically talk about. So, I mean, I'd be willing to look it up and like maybe give you some answers directly about that particular place, but right now I don't have that information.
We've heard of that, so I'm just thinking that might be good to have an answer for.
Okay. Looks like Ellen has a question.
Yeah, is there a place in the US that's been using it for a long time? And have there been any surveys of voters after they've used it for a while, what they think that you're aware of?
Yes, their long time is relative, but yes, it has been used other places and there has been surveys. I do cover that a little bit more further down.
Yeah.
So I'll wait on that. Don, do you have a question?
Well, I was going to ask what your strategy is for rolling out further adoption.
Yep, I will cover that too.
Okay.
So any questions specifically on how it works? Susan?
I do have a question in that I believe I had heard that ranked choice voting elections were nonpartisan. Is that true or not?
Our group is nonpartisan. Ranked choice voting itself doesn't benefit one group or the other. Aside from some of the things that I said, like the people that have the good intentions, it benefits them. Does that answer your question, Susan?
Not really. I had thought, from what I'd read about ranked choice, was that where you have ranked choice elections, candidates are not identified by a political party.
Oh, that's not necessarily true. It can be that way, of course. But it's not necessarily that. I don't have an example of a place that does that right now. I know it does happen sometimes that because it doesn't matter ultimately and eventually, longer down the road. But because we've had parties for so long, I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. They still might identify as this, but we also might have a lot more that just identify as independent. Marty has a question.
Yeah, now I'm familiar with Susan's situation in the city, but your example that you put up about voting for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and you say that the vote just eliminates number 6, and you still have 5 more to deal with under that type of an example. I'm wondering, is that the way it's supposed to work? I mean, you keep coming back and voting 5 or 6 times if there are a bunch of candidates, or was that just your example?
That is actually a good point. So this is what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's your thing's flow chart says that just the bottom vote getter is the only one eliminated, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking, say in the city of St. Louis, when they vote, the 2 top vote getters will face off in the general election. but does this really have to work to the extent of having 4 or 5 elections?
So a point that I neglected was, if you look at the flow chart, it actually says IRV. That's because it's also referred to as instant runoff voting, which is one of the big benefits of ranked choice voting is people don't have to come back for another election, because when they fill out their ballot, their second choice is already written in. So if their first choice isn't the winner, then the system itself moves it to the second. And then they get, so there's no more elections. It's one election, singular. One of the benefits that comes from that is we're not paying for extra primary elections. We're not dealing with that come back to vote. I'll touch a little bit more on the different voting, like approval voting and stuff a little further, and I'll compare them a little bit more.
Okay.
It looks like Steve has a question.
Yeah, if this is the right place to ask it. So from my reading on RCV, there are cases where you don't the outcome is not necessarily a person who has a majority vote. Do you recognize that as a possible result?
No, because mathematically, like, that doesn't happen. It is set for 50% or more or nothing. Mathematically, you can't have less unless you're having more than one winner, which is a possibility. You can make our elections multiple choice, ranked choice voting, but I don't have a good example of where we would use that right off the bat. So mathematically, no. If you're using ranked choice voting, it will be more than 50% every time. Looks like Susan has another question.
Yeah, it's really a comment again. They just did this for the first time this year in the New York City mayoral primary. And what happened was none of the top vote getters had 50% on election night after the first round. And so they then had to go through the elimination rounds to get to 50% to determine who was going to be the candidate in the general election. And it turned out to be a man named Eric Adams, who was the borough president of my home borough of Brooklyn, and who just got elected mayor in the general election. But it took them, I believe, a week or two to work through the elimination processes of the taking out the least voted for candidates until they got to enough people who had, through their first, second, third, fourth, perhaps had gotten to 50% for the top vote getting candidate. And so that was the main drawback, that you didn't know on election night who the winner was. It took more time, but you ended up with a candidate who had more than 50% of the vote. And I guess the general election was a week or two ago and ended up winning with 80% of the vote citywide.
Hey, Austin, can I jump in on that?
Sure.
In the
I have a
buzzing.
slide on it later, so if you don't feel like doing it, I also cover that too.
So the reason that New York election, it took a week to get the results back, was not necessarily anything to do with ranked choice voting. You heard all these bad things coming out of the news about the New York election. So there was some like they had left some test ballots on some of the voting machines, and that caused like their tabulation to be wrong initially. And that's a mistake any election board can make. They don't need to have ranked choice voting for something like that to happen. But the reason that it took a week was because their absentee ballots were not allowed to be counted until a week after. So it had nothing to do with ranked choice voting. It was just their standard procedure for counting votes.
Yes, elegantly said. To add to that, we don't technically know who won elections on voting in our current system. Like on that voting night, we don't technically know. And there's many cases of when we never really know. They just call it for one person or another. In ranked choice voting, you would get all of the votes, and then we would present the votes. And there wouldn't be this, well, votes are still coming in week 2, week 3, week 4 from the election. We wouldn't have that. You get them all in, you count them all, and then they're done. There's no question about it, like it happened in New York City, in Iowa, it happened a little bit in Virginia. You see it here in Missouri. Like a little bit later, you still see some votes trailing in because they're still counting them. Ranked choice voting would require everyone to just have their votes in. Boom, they're all counted. We can present them all. New York City decided that they weren't going to count them until a week later, the absentee ballots until a week later, which did throw everything off because you can't present the results if not everyone has voted. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, but if there's any last minute, I'll give you a few seconds. All right, I'm gonna move on. Okay, so we covered issues about our current voting system. We've got primaries, we've got split votes, we've got expensive runoffs, we've got candidate winning without a majority. We've got the spoiler scenario. We've got limited choices. We've got this weird competition dynamic in our elections. We've got gerrymandering. So some of you guys have asked, where is it being used? This is where it's been used. This is the most recent as of 2 days ago. You can check this out on Fair Vote. They keep track of like how RCV is being used all over the country. As you can see, RCV is used statewide in Maine and Alaska. RCV was used for the 2020 primaries in 3 states. It was used in local elections in several. And for a while now, it's been used for military and overseas voting. It's not new for that sector. And we had some questions about open primaries versus closed primaries. So just real quick, closed primaries means only a member of that party, someone is registered as that under that party, can vote in that primary. Open primaries means anyone can vote in this primary. So RCV works for both. It doesn't really cause any problems working. That being said, if you have closed primaries, it does exclude voters such as independent voters, or someone like, say, a Republican was like, I like that Democrat and I want to vote for that Democrat. Well, they can't do that. Too bad. So there is that. And in places that are safe red, safe blue, it can leave people out of the voting process. So most of the time, ranked choice voting is argued to be accompanied with open primaries, just because it makes sense. Everybody can get their say that way. But you don't need it. It'll still work just fine without it. Now the New York City mayor race. I put this in the same thing because along with those other issues that we talked about, the New York City mayor's race, there were also some candidates candidates and voters that voiced concerns that independent voters couldn't vote for the Democrat in that primary. And if you don't know, that New York City is safe blue, like absolutely safe blue. So who wins the primary is almost always going to win that area. So we saw that in that election as well. That safe blue area excluded people that weren't registered as that party. So they identify as an independent to the registration. So they were not allowed to vote in that. So where it still works, you saw the election, you saw that Eric won with more than 50% of the vote. There is the leaving people out part. And hence, open primaries would be a good thing. And then there was approval voting. So how does approval voting work? I know some of you know how it works, but I'll just explain it for anybody that doesn't. So approval voting, you vote for who you approve of, hence the name. And then you come back for another election to vote from those, and then again and again and again until you get a more than 50%. So it does get you the more than 50%. You just have to keep coming back. There's a lot of issues that could come from that, and I could spend a long time on that, but I don't want to waste everybody's time on that. But because it's already in St. Louis City, this is what led us to focus on St. Louis County, the metro area. Okay, we also have the question of who does it affect? Does it benefit or favor anybody? It doesn't. It favors the candidate, specifically the candidate, not the party, that has the visions and ideas that align with the majority of voters. Gerrymandering. So you could still have gerrymandering because there's nothing technically stopping it. But how gerrymandering works is you know that certain people in certain areas are going to vote one way or the other because there's only the two options. With ranked choice voting, there aren't just the two options. There's any amount of options that you could want. making gerrymandering very difficult, because what they do is a mathematical game. Is they assume that this area is going to vote this way, so they're going to exclude them so that they can gain other voters so that they can keep seats. So the answer to the question is, yeah, it's still there, but so much more difficult. I am really good at math, and so is Connor down there. I don't think we could mathematically figure out how to incorporate gerrymandering into ranked choice voting. All right, and voter turnout. So we've got 3 studies here. I'm not gonna go through them all, but basically the studies and one paper suggests that there is an increase in voter turnout with ranked choice voting. Feel free to read those as much as you'd like, but that's what I've seen across the board. It either has no significant effect or it has a positive effect on voter turnout, specifically in the area of younger voters. So the outlook for my group and Missouri. So we had exit polls answer these questions as people came out, and we explained ranked choice voting to them. This is what we found. Connor, I don't remember when this was done. Do you have that date on hand?
This was, we collected information. How easy do you find ranked choice voting, and how much do you like it, at exit surveys that were conducted on elections in Kansas City, St. Louis, primarily, but we also had some in rural Missouri, and they were collected. This is the specifically November 2020 election. These numbers are, but we've done exit surveys in the municipal election in Kansas City, and it was 2020, as well as the municipal election in Blue Springs in 2020. So those are the numbers. You can see that people like it. And that they find it easy to use. One of the big concerns people have, namely election clerks, is that ranked choice voting is, it's going to be so complicated, people aren't going to understand the ballot. But everyone ranks things. Like BuzzFeed polls are a scourge on the earth. They're just everywhere. People love to rank things, so they do it with their candidates.
Yeah. Just as an example, if anybody watches any of the shows like America's Got Talent, American Idol, any shows like that, usually have the person that you want to win. Then you have, okay, well, if they don't win, I'll take that. I think that person's pretty good too. And so on and so on. You do it even when not prompted. So ranked choice voting is already built in, as Connor was saying. Here's some more data that has been gathered. Basically, pretty good support, a little less with Republicans by this, but still supportive. Susan definitely pointed out that there's a hardware issue, right? The voting machines need to be able to handle it. This is a map of what is RCV ready. And as you can see, most of Missouri can do it. And then software is the next biggest amount, and that is just updating software. Now, hardware is a little bit more difficult, but through some looking and digging that we've done on voting machines, you'd almost have to go out of your way to get a new voting machine that can't process ranked choice voting. So the only hardware issues that you would face is when people when those counties, which are just these, or not even counties, these two places where that's an issue, is once they once it's time to replace them. And I don't have the dates that I had in my head before, but that date is supposed to be coming up soon for a lot of voting machines. So when they need to be replaced, you just replace them with a newer model and ranked choice voting takes over. All right. Adoption paths is definitely Connor's specialty, so I'm going to let him talk on this one.
I don't know if I was ever introduced. Hi, my name's Connor. I am with the statewide organization trying to bring ranked choice voting to Missouri, Missourians for Ranked Choice Voting. So I'm going to just talk about how we can bring ranked choice voting, either statewide or locally. So statewide, our primary goal is to bring ranked choice voting statewide at all levels of government. The first way to do this is through the General Assembly. If we do that, we're probably going to have to make incremental changes, which is not ideal. But what we can also do at the General Assembly is we have a bill, HB 1137, that we were working with Representative Dan Stacy last year on, that would have brought ranked choice voting to St. Louis County. So the General Assembly is kind of part of our local strategy as well. I'll come back to that. The other statewide route that we have is using a ballot initiative petition, and it's going to be the most work, but it's also going to give us the most flexibility in terms of demanding what it is that we want in Missouri. We will be able to get both local and statewide offices using ranked choice voting, using a ballot initiative, but it's going to take probably about 300,000 signatures statewide. It's an undertaking, so our goal for that is to get that running in 2024. So going back to talk about HB 1137, it would introduce ranked choice voting throughout St. Louis County, so not just at the county level. If we did something on the county charter, we would have to do it just with the county. So we wouldn't be able to also bring in any of those charter cities in the St. Louis County jurisdiction, and that might be confusing for voters. So we want to just hit it all at once. That's why we're going through the state legislature. It would, when we were forming this bill, we worked with Eric Fay, who you mentioned earlier. He was part of our team that was helping to draft this bill with Representative Dan Stacy, who, Austin, I think you swapped slides there. Yeah. He's a Republican legislator who has been sort of our champion for ranked choice voting. We also got co-sponsor Representative Brown as well. And we've been working on getting more and more co-sponsors for reintroducing the legislation this next session. And we have high hopes for that. Then specifically more local, in terms of charter cities and counties, we do have the path to engage with the board and council, get them to pass a charter amendment. If they don't work with us, having a petition drive, really bringing the change at the community level to get the community involved in what we want to see. We have an ongoing petition drive in Kansas City. The signature count is much lower than what we need statewide. So instead of 300,000, we need 3,000 signatures. And we are expecting that we will reach that by February of next year so we can be on the August ballot in Kansas City. We were working with the city council. They just did not find that this was something that was in their, it just wasn't their top priority. They have COVID things they need to work on. They've got stuff with the police. So changing the elections didn't seem important enough to them. So we're showing them that the people think that it's important and that they need to change. So that's kind of the strategies that we've got. We're starting at the top. If we can make change by engaging with elected representatives, we're going to do that. But if we can't, we know that we've got the grassroots actions that we can take, and we're going to take those if we have to. Any questions on that? Well, I'm not going to answer any questions. Let's keep moving.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, he went over all three. So this was the ideal kind of path we were going to take. It's kind of in flux depending on how legislators want to play, or how the education's going, whatever, how COVID affects everything. All right, so yeah, that's majority of things. Is there any questions on all of that? I think I hit everyone else's questions, but Steve.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the pathways to getting RCV in St. Louis County. So the first way I heard was HB 1137 out of the General Assembly. And well, we know how dicey that can be, but so, and the other way would be statewide RCV, which of course would include the county, through a statewide petition. And that would be geared towards implementation in 2024 or when?
It would be on the ballot in 2024. Oh, I'm getting sorry. It would be on the ballot in 2024, implementation within the next 2 years.
Okay. And then a third way for the county, and that's, tell me a little bit more about that in terms of like a county petition, or can the county council do things on their own, or go over that again for me, Connor, for someone.
Yeah. So we have a charter county. I think we have a charter county, so we have our own, like, we can do things slightly different than the state wants us to. And so we can amend the county charter so that it would allow us to use ranked choice voting in elections that were held for county offices. Now, within the county, there are also charter cities that basically have the same freedoms in that they can do things how they want to do them. And so if we adopted ranked choice voting at the county level, the best we could hope for is that we could get non-charter cities, so like your smaller cities, and the county offices to use ranked choice voting. But then you would still have charter cities that would need to adopt it themselves if you want to have that consistency all the way down the ballot from the county level down. So that's why, I mean, we can do it. It's just you're not hitting all the elections in St. Louis County, if that makes sense.
Sure. So in terms of amending the charter, does the council have the authority to do that, or is that something that requires voter approval?
It always requires voter approval, but the county, don't quote me on this, I haven't looked into St. Louis counties specifically, but I believe they can put a motion, a piece before the people, and they can send it to the people if they want to. So it doesn't require a petition to get it on the ballot. A councilman like Tim Fitch, for example, could say, I want this, they vote on it, and it goes to the people. So that's a lot easier than getting like 10,000 signatures.
Right,
I don't know what the number is.
And that would be the other local way of doing this, by putting out I've never really thought much about a petition process in the county. That would be another way of doing this. Is that right or not? In terms of a petition, is that an option? or not?
Austin, do you know off the top of your head in St. Louis?
I think it kind of falls under like what you were talking about with the charter cities and stuff. It gets kind of like dicey because some of them don't want to consider themselves part of something or the county or this is not my absolute area of expertise, but
If you give me like 10 minutes, I'll have an answer for you.
So, so you're pinning your hopes primarily on which route then would you say would be the most fruitful, you think, or the most likely to?
I personally am believing that we can get something through the General Assembly. We have people on both sides of the aisles who are supporting this. And as it gains traction around the rest of the United States, people are looking at it. They're saying that's nice. Also, there is a sense that they don't want statewide ranked choice voting until they've seen it like a pilot program. And so we have spun this in the legislature as this is a pilot program to see how ranked choice voting can go statewide before you implement it with everyone. The Republican Party has this year in particular with the Senate race, there's going to be 10 at least people running for that U.S. Senate seat. There is lots of sentiment against Eric Greitens winning. He has won by splitting people before. He's going to potentially win that Senate seat by splitting the voters again. When you have 10 candidates, you're not necessarily picking someone who has a majority of support. You're picking whoever has the largest faction after dividing everyone else. So the Republican Party at the very last day of session, last couple days of session this past year, introduced a bill that would introduce runoff elections requiring 50%. And if we can convince them, hey, this does it cheaper, they love cheaper, then I think we definitely have a solid chance of passing it through the legislature. It's the conversation.
A good point. That's a good point. So they're definitely the germ here for Republican support. I can see that. And when you say pilot program, people are talking about at one or more sites, and they have to be Missouri sites. I don't know why people couldn't. You were talking about a pilot program, right? I mean,
yeah,
we've got all sorts of pilot programs already throughout the United States.
Yeah, but that's not Missouri, right? We gotta have our peeps in the hot seat, you know?
Show me in Missouri. Okay.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, Glenn.
So Don, you have a question.
So building on the last two questions, I would think, and going back to your strategy chart, and I think from what I've heard here, what I see missing is what's happening with local government, in that you do have the city of St. Louis that's adopted one of the forms, which is a demonstration project in and of itself. It's theoretically a successful one. So this is as much as a recommendation as question is, but wouldn't it make sense to have a dual strategy that you are working to build support and going ahead and enacting this process in a select number of communities to help build that consensus? And I say that in the context of really not having a great deal of faith in Republican Party leadership and wanting to give up the ability to gerrymander and have a select power structure control who are the options. So long question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And that that is our strategy. Our strategy is we need multiple paths because we can't necessarily like count on one of them working, right? So this is specifically our statewide initiative project plan, you could say. What we've been trying to do is raise, like Austin mentioned, we have, I mean, you invited STL-RCV here. That is the St. Louis group that's trying to bring ranked choice voting to St. Louis. He mentioned Better Ballot KC. That is the ranked choice voting group bringing ranked choice voting to Kansas City. So we're building these groups that are running the localized campaigns, while our statewide group is focused on the long-term, get it statewide. So we are doing, it's just not in the chart. So that's probably a fair point, that it should probably be added that is what we are doing. We are supporting those efforts also.
Yeah, I would include it in the chart because it's kind of a message to those players in the legislature that either lead or get out of the way, because this is coming.
I like it. Thank you.
It looks like Al has a question.
Yes, I got one more. I'm back to a procedural question. It seems you mentioned, the only example you mentioned of filling out these ballots is like we do it online. But does that mean that these have to be done on an actual computer, or can you do these on paper? And then if you do it on paper, how much more likely is it to make mistakes?
So you can definitely do it on paper. I couldn't quite hear the end of that last question you said.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see an example of a filled out ballot that you had there where, I mean, you like put in a number, or you have numbers next to each name, or, you know, that are like you circle numbers, or how do you actually fill it?
So the example that I showed you all is just my personal opinion, would be the best way to do it. But I have seen other ballots in other places where sometimes they say write the number. I personally don't like that plan, but you know, to each their own. But yeah, there's a number of ways they can formulate it. And at one point we did have what was it, Eric Fay that had, like, we gave him a mock version of it. It was very similar to the one that I showed you, obviously with like candidates, not like pizza or whatever, but it was a mock setup, very similar to what I presented. This way conserves a lot more space, and everyone can, and there's not like, is that a 2 or a 3, or is that a 5 or 6? I can't tell. It eliminates that. It's just a check. Keep things real simple. So that's probably the route that we would go. That said, there are other ways that it could be done.
If somebody checks like 2 people for 3rd place, does that eliminate the whole ballot, or does that, you know, does that make the whole ballot invalid because they've made a mistake, or handle it? I just see the chance of mistakes are much higher in this thing.
Yeah, it would invalidate. That would be like one of the reasons you would want to push for like electronic ballots, because electronic ballots wouldn't let you do that. Paper ballots, you theoretically could do that. It's an interesting point.
There's a lot of people who want paper ballots, so you may want to get ready to address that.
All right, I'll have to get back to you on that one. On the paper ballot part, I mean. Steve, you have another question?
Yeah, so for RCV in St. Louis County, what elections are envisioned that this would apply to?
We would hope for all of them. We have had a few people, and I mean like a very minimal amount of people that are like, okay, that will work for this, but it won't work for this. but people that tend to like it tend to go, no, this is great. We should do this for everything. And the people that don't like it are kind of just like, maybe for the mayor, but not for city council or something, you know. But I think a lot of that comes down to education around how it works. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay, I had another question too. I'm back to the adoption paths and the local engaged boards and can't read it right now, but engaged boards and councils. So have you had any discussions as yet? Is there a readout from our county council members or Sam Page on RCV and have they taken any position at all to your knowledge?
Yes, we have spoken to Eric Fay. I believe we've spoken to Sam Page. I didn't personally. I believe Connor spoke to those two.
I spoke with Tim Fitch, and Tim Fitch is all in favor of it. I would probably just guess, based on how he got elected, Sam Page would not be in favor of ranked choice voting. But
they had an in-person on and a virtual option at the end of here, but and I've been able to find some to ask in the Zoom chat. Right.
what was that?
I think that might have been a new person I just admitted.
Okay. Gotcha. But we've had positive interaction with Tim Fitch, and Dan Stacy met with the Municipal League of St. Louis, and they also had a positive reaction. So those are the two that I'm aware of that we have spoken to as of right now. That's not to say there aren't more. Those are the ones I have off the top of my head.
Okay, any other questions before I take a little poll of people? And I don't mean to shut Austin or Connor out. We can continue discussing this, but I think I'd like to ask people, based upon what you've known prior or what you've heard today, I'm going to ask how many people would like to see RCV implemented in St. Louis County, how many people think they're against it, and how many people are undecided. So by raising your hand, physically or virtually, how many people would like to see St. Louis, like the effort to go forward with RCV in St. Louis? I see lots of hands. I see a clear majority. And how many people are opposed? Who's opposed? Sorry, I have to work through my screens here. I don't see anybody opposed. Oh wait, Genevieve Lee is opposed. Sorry, Genevieve.
Steve Reed is opposed. I see Steve's hand up.
Oh, am my hand still up? Sorry
Yes,
about
Steve.
that. Let me get rid of that.
Yes, sorry I joined so late. I was trying to find everyone at the library and I was already running late too.
All right, and Genevieve, we'll give you a chance to talk in a second. And how many people?
Also, my name's Geneva.
How many? Geneva. Okay. And how many people just want more information? Think we shouldn't, okay, Marty and Al, that's two. And, okay. All right, so it looks like we have a clear majority who are would like to see this go forward, and we've got a couple of people still undecided. Geneva, is that right? Did you want to? Since you joined us late, did you want to talk at all on this topic or?
Yes, I would love to. Hi, my name's Geneva. I use she, series pronouns, and yeah, I'm involved, or I work on a couple campaigns, and I'm just like being involved in St. Louis politics, I guess. And I studied public policy as an undergrad and graduated last year. And I was attracted to this meeting because I know I was a proponent of ranked choice voting until actually this year, when I learned more about Proposition D, which involved approval voting in St. Louis City. And I actually asked the director of Show Me Integrity, who led the initiative to put approval voting into place in St. Louis, why they didn't choose ranked choice voting and did approval voting instead. And he actually referred me to some information explaining that ranked choice voting doesn't actually improve democratic outcomes. And usually the preferences collapse toward the median choice as they normally would, although some ranked choice voting actually allows for some unpopular outliers to end up winning over more popular candidates because of the way that preferences collapse. And so that's why St. Louis City implemented approval voting rather than ranked choice voting, especially because with an election where the winner of the primary usually becomes the winner of the general election, like in St. Louis City or like in St. Louis County, approval voting tends to have better outcomes. Additionally, there's a couple other voting methods that are good as well, with my personal favorite being star voting, which is similar to ranked choice voting, but leads to overall better outcomes. So there's a lot of different types of ranked choice voting, and the stuff that is more straightforward, like what they have in Maine, which is probably the most well-known example of ranked choice voting, doesn't actually lead to more democratic outcomes. There's a couple more nuanced voting systems that are based in ranked choice voting that I guess tune or fine tune some of the problems with ranked choice voting and actually have more democratic and equitable outcomes. So I just wanted to mention that if we move forward with ranked choice voting, we might actually just be putting a Band-Aid on a broken system, and it doesn't actually improve the outcome of elections, but might make us think, oh yeah, we've done enough and we don't need to move forward and improve upon our voting system. And so I worry that if we don't go all in on creating the best voting system possible, that it might delay implementing that by who knows how long. So I do support star voting, I support approval voting, but I don't support ranked choice voting, even though most people just taking a cursory view of it think that it's a really good alternative to what we have. But really it's just flashy. I think a flashy topic that's been in the news recently. So that's my concern. And thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, does star voting have a different name?
So STAR is just an acronym. It's called Score, then Automatic Runoff. And there's a really good Wikipedia page on it that I'd be happy to send in the chat. And it explains how it's implemented. So essentially what it does is instead of eliminating people in multiple rounds, it's pretty much just one big round of voting in which people rank their preferences, and then all of the numbers are added up together, and whichever one has the highest votes ends up winning. So it's slightly different than ranked choice voting.
Okay, so you can, under star voting, you could have, or could
You can have rankings.
Have a candidate win without a majority?
Yes, but it's sort of a plurality, because majorities don't always lead to the most equitable outcomes.
Well,
So
yeah. Right,
so
well,
star, so I'm sorry, Steve. So
Yeah.
if I understand that, I just want to clarify. So the star system is ranked choice voting that does not require a 50% majority in order to elect someone. Is that correct, Geneva?
Yes. So for example, there might be, and it also doesn't necessarily require plurality. Like for example, if there's multiple different candidates and there's one that has a plurality, but then a really, really popular second choice that everyone likes that second choice. In a regular voting system, I mean, people might just only go with the number one choice that just gets the most first votes, for example. But so again, it's kind of like ranked choice voting, but slightly different enough that, like, I don't know, I think it's just worth reading about.
So
All
we
right,
still,
well, why don't you-
we can still end up with someone elected with 35% of the vote.
It would be 35% of number one votes, but not overall votes. So
How is that an improvement?
because people can have second choices and third choices that they still like a lot. So that's kind of the issue with what we have in the first place, is that if we maintain our current voting system in which someone has a plurality of the votes or first past the post, it might be someone who has a lot of strong supporters, but are vastly unpopular with the rest of the population. But this way, someone who may not be the number one most have the strongest base, but is well liked and generally liked by a lot of people, can still win an election. So instead of having someone who's very polarizing, who just has a big base, we can have someone who's amenable to the overall population.
Thank you.
Okay, Don has a question. Don? Unmute.
Yeah, question, comment. I think, those are interesting variations that Geneva's bringing up. And my thought is to Austin and Connor that you might want to build a little more depth into your presentation to address those other variations. It's a little hard to digest that further depth, just at the moment, but it's still in an endorsement of a concept here, which needs to be the arguments for the education tool needs to cover all the bases, I think.
To that point, we wanted to keep the presentation short enough that we weren't we give you guys as much time to ask questions as possible. We have heard of star voting, we've heard of approval voting, we've talked about them. The big issue with star voting, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is its a counting system. So you count up all your points. And when you count up points, yeah, sure, you'll collect all the votes and whatever. But the big issue that comes into play is how much do you give each rank? Do you give 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point? Do you give, it gets complicated really quickly. And if you leave that up to a body of people to decide how much each rank is worth, you get into some philosophical questions that are not something that just some random body should be answering.
I'd also like to address, so one of the biggest draws for me for ranked choice voting is the fact that it ensures that we have someone who is supported by a majority candidate. The recommended star voting does not necessarily do that. The recommended approval voting, it enforces a majority between the two candidates who may or may not have gotten a majority of votes in that first runoff or in that primary election. But one of the biggest I'd say principles that people want to uphold is one person, one vote. And under star voting, you do not have that. And if we start going up into federal elections, it is very likely it would be challenged in courts, and it would not hold up to muster. Ranked choice voting is being used around the country right now. It's well tested. It's proven that it can be used for those federal elections. It's well tested that it can be used for other elections. But I think those are important points to keep in mind when you're considering these different voting systems.
And
ranked choice voting is used around the world in many places, right? Geneva, is star implemented anywhere at this point?
Let me check real quick.
So I did a fair amount of research on voting systems, become an instant expert in this area, and I can tell you it's very complicated.
Yes.
And there is no perfect voting system.
Mhm.
They all have pluses and minuses, and what a number of people will consider a plus, a number of other people would consider a minus. And
Mhm.
it's not clear to me how you would arrive at how you would arrive at a point of agreement for deciding what's a plus and a minus. So anyway,
Mhm.
Geneva, did you find
Yeah.
it?
So some of my other concerns is when we're talking about how we assign values for ranking, wouldn't ranked choice voting have the same situation in which we would, have multiple votes for one person?
So it's actually, when you're using ranked choice voting, your ballot is your preference. So your vote counts for your top preference until it does not, until it moves on to your second preference. So it still meets the definition of one person, one vote, because it has that transferring capacity to it. So that's how they argued it. I believe it was the court case in Minneapolis. Yeah. So we've got I can send I'll send it to Austin to send to you all. But we have a legal memo that we had. Angela Gable, she is a lawyer here in St. Louis. And so she wrote up a thing on the legality of ranked choice voting and if it can be used in Missouri. So I'll send that to Austin to send to Steve to send to everyone.
Awesome. Also, I know that approval voting, how would that count as one person under one vote? Because St. Louis City uses that method and that involves multiple votes. Is that
right? So it doesn't. But under what I'm specifically referencing is I believe it's I don't know the exact thing, but under some of the federal elections that we have, you need to meet that one person, one vote requirement. So it doesn't necessarily matter at the municipal level, but as we get into like federal elections, it does matter.
okay? But for the county specifically, it'd be possible to have more than one vote per person?
I think so. Don't quote me on it, but I think so.
Okay.
Don has a question. Don?
Yeah, I'm throwing this to Susan, who has been a part of a demonstration project in the city. What's your reaction to how approval voting worked there?
I thought it worked pretty well. In the primary, we had both Democrats and Republicans winning. Now in St. Louis is more blue than New York City is. New York City, after all, elected both Rudy Giuliani and then Harold Bloomberg as mayors, the Republicans. Whereas I don't think we've had a Republican mayor in St. Louis, and I don't know, since World War II or before. So anyway, the top two vote getters ended up both being Democrats. And normally the primary would have elected the mayor because the winner of the primary would go on to the general and win. I mean, very few people vote Republican in the city. So this time you had the top two Democrats winning and the general election, in essence, being a runoff election between those two. As it turned out, the person who won the highest number of votes in the primary, Tashora Jones, also won the general, but for once she won with more than 50% of the vote. So I would say that the outcome was not necessarily changed in terms of who won, but we had a mayor who was elected by a majority of the people in the city, which is not a bad thing.
Okay, I had one other question for Austin or Connor, trying to figure out how to say it. Well, if you eliminated primaries and went with ranked choice voting, the net outcome of that would be, I think, that the person elected would generally tend to be, I'm almost by definition, more of a centrist, right? I mean, wouldn't that be the effect?
So I see the logic, but it's almost hard to say in the sense that when you gerrymander districts, you're basically taking away the general consensus of a state or an area that is being gerrymandered. So, I mean, if you've ever looked into really heavily gerrymandered areas, you'll see that the whole population, if you were to poll them as a whole, they would poll on like policy and ideas that would almost not align with who won. So it's kind of hard to say in that regard. Yeah, it might go a little bit more centrist.
Well, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of an open race without the primaries. I mean, if you have somebody, say, kind of on the far left or farther right, they both win their primaries, then they go head to head. The only outcome is going to be the one on the far left or the one on the far right is going to end up winning. Whereas if you have, certainly if you eliminated the primaries, you're going to get, the far left and far right might have had enough support to get through their primary. But in an open forum with all the candidates there, they simply may not stack up or have that amount of support once they're before the entire electorate.
So there is, I think are you referring to just only having one ranked choice voting election?
Yeah.
So you can do ranked choice voting with a primary system, where you have a nonpartisan primary.
Well, I was going to ask it both ways. What happens if you have the primaries and if you don't have the primaries, in terms of what kinds of outcomes would that be in terms of the centrality, if you will, of the person being elected? What kind of outcomes would you expect?
So I think it's also important to keep in mind that if we implement ranked choice voting or some sort of alternative voting system, that sets us up on the path to being able to have more than just two parties. And it's not going to happen immediately, but we will see down the road, we will have more voices in the elections. Oh, same. We will have more voices in our elections, and we'll have more people that we can choose from. And so at first you might see, if you implement it with primaries, you'll have whoever gets that party's nomination is going to have the support of the majority of that party, which we don't have right now even. So you have a fraction of people choosing who our elected representatives are. With ranked choice voting, you would have someone who has at least the majority of support of that party, who is advanced on. And then you'll have the regular election, which will, at least right now, it'll probably be very similar. But you'll have a different person being elected in the primary, so you'll have a different outcome nonetheless. Long term, not long term. Nonpartisan primaries, you can do it where you have the top four from the primary are advanced onto the general election, and you have another ranked choice voting election. And so that will bring, it's very similar to the approval voting situation, but instead of using approval voting in the first stage, you can use ranked choice voting, and then you can use ranked choice voting again after you've narrowed it down to like a digestible amount of people.
Okay.
Don.
I think Don has a question.
Yeah, so I think I'd be horrified to hear this discussion or debate on the floor of the legislature, but I think that'd be very difficult in terms of all these different variations. But if you look at local government structure, most most of these communities across the state these are nonpartisan elections for municipal government positions. And if that's the case, it's kind of a good proving ground for working out the bugs before you take it, to the state level. Just that's my comment and question combined.
Yeah.
We are trying to get it implemented. Any place that feels like, yeah, it's time for a change. We've reached out to municipalities, cities, any place we can to see if anybody wants to hear us out. And that's one of the local pathways that Connor was talking about.
Austin, can you go back to the slide that had all of the St. Louis County races on it?
I think so.
So that's Kansas City area. There we go. Yeah. So this is all of the August primary elections that had 3 or more people in them. So every single one of them, you have someone winning with less than a majority of the vote, probably around 40%, including one Republican race. So it's not just like a Democratic party issue. It's happening everywhere. And so I think St. Louis County is uniquely situated because it has very competitive races and because it has it has the problem that we are trying to fix. So I think you're right. Yes, municipalities are great proving ground. That was probably part of the reason we are working on St. Louis County as that pilot program. But that was yes, you are correct.
Okay, Susan's got a question.
I wanted to respond to what Steve was concerned about regarding having centrist candidates won. Again, in the city, when we had our election last year, we had 3 Democrats and a Republican in the approval voting primary. I was concerned that the progressive vote was going to be split and that we would end up with the least progressive Democrat, the centrist, winning. What ended up happening was that the centrist got knocked out, that our electorate in the city placed the 2 most progressive candidates as the top 2 vote getters. And they faced off in the general election. So it really depends on who's running and who your electorate is in terms of whether or not a progressive, the progressive vote will be split and you would get a moderate. The opposite happened in the city, and I was quite surprised by that.
Looks like Geneva has a question.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, so we keep talking about the importance of having a majority of voters approving, but I feel like phrasing it like that is unintentionally disingenuous. Because when we look at, for example, the mayor's election, which used ranked choice voting in New York City this year, Eric Adams was the winner, but he only had 30% of the vote in the first 5 or 6 rounds out of 8. And then he ended up with a very, very slight majority of 50.4% and knocked out literally all the other he was one of the most centrist candidates that there were. And so this man had 30% of the vote in the beginning and for most of the election, and then just barely eked out what you could call a majority. But again, it's not like most of the voters necessarily approved of him off the bat. And again, I think that I mean, saying that there's something special about 51% is also kind of disingenuous because it doesn't, you know, I guess, lead to overall greatest utility. Like, for example, if students in a class are voting on what snack they should have, and 51% of the students in a class say we should have, you know, brownies or ice cream or brownie ice cream, and they're pretty happy about that, but the rest of the class has a dairy or gluten intolerance, those other kids in the class are going to be very unhappy. But if instead they have something like, I don't know, cotton candy, and pretty much everyone likes it, even if it's not that one half of the class's favorite, because you took into consideration the other students' preferences and how severe their dislike was for the majority candidate, it led to a better outcome overall. To use a politician as an example, let's say 51% of the population like Donald Trump, the other 49% is probably very unhappy. But a more centrist candidate, such as Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter, is probably going to have much more overall likability, even if it's not an absolute majority. So again, my other issue with ranked choice voting is that it's not actually an overall majority. It's just used in this like tallied way in which people actually aren't participating past the first round. And again, the idea of a majority of itself doesn't necessarily lead to a majority of overall utility.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. We probably need to bring this to a close. There's one final question I wanted to ask, which is, what would you like our group to do or other groups to do? I'm asking this of Connor and Austin, of course.
So there's the general need for if we're doing a petition drive, we'll need people to work the petitions. That is a definite thing that we're going to need. Another thing that is always helpful is connections. So like you talk to, so you know this other group, they might be interested in ranked choice voting, so that we can spread the word. Spreading the word is key, especially for a group like mine who majority focuses on education. That makes us more useful for Connor's team in actually getting the statewide or countywide or whatever implementations forward. Because if we were to have a vote on it and, you know, only 20% of people know what ranked choice voting is, then of course it's not going to do great. Some people might just go, we needed something different anyway, so we're just going to vote yes. But ultimately, people are not going to vote for things they don't know what it is. So connections and boots on the ground are two big things.
Well, you don't have a so in terms of St. Louis County, I mean, there's a couple different things you mentioned that could be done locally. One is the county council, if they're interested in amending the charter, I guess action could initiate from them, which would result in, I don't know if that would result in a petition or not, but in whether it does or not, the other thing is citizens can initiate a petition to go to the county, right?
Yes.
And so has a petition been worked up yet? What needs to be done there? I'm working it through, you know. If you want this to happen, you got to have a petition. You got to, you know,
well,
get it out there.
I will say, one, I don't think that we've started drafting a petition. Austin, correct me if I'm wrong. But we do have our statewide petition, and we can probably scale that down to work on the county level. We also have the petition that's being run right now in Kansas City, so we could also adapt that. So getting the language is not going to be a high barrier for us. What is a high barrier is people.
Right, but if you have something concrete, then that helps get the people as well.
Right. So we do have one concrete thing, which is that HB 1137 that I mentioned. And we are planning to advance that this next year, January to March, January to May, the springtime. And we need people to help us contact legislators. That is something that we definitely concretely can ask for help for right now. It is a tangible way to help. And
Okay.
if you want to sign up for that, I've got a link right there. If you tick the box, I will help contact legislators if you sign up on that link that I posted in the chat.
Okay. Thanks. Let me click on that. Okay, thank you. All right, before we go on to redistricting, any other final comments?
I just want to say thank you for listening to Austin and myself. I have to jump, but thank you.
All right, yeah, I want to thank both Austin and Connor for coming here today and helping us with this somewhat complex topic. Yeah, really appreciate it. Personally, I think RCV, I can see it happening. I am not opposed to it. There's always more to learn. I know that not everyone is a big fan. I've read various negative things that I could go into at depth at some point, but not today. But there are pros and cons, and we are getting some good feedback from other implementations that are going on, and that should help as well in the arguments for RCV implementation, I believe. All right, well, thanks again, guys. Thanks for coming today. Okay, we're going to turn to Al Gerber. Is going to
Steve, can I interrupt just for a second?
Go ahead.
Steve? Yeah, taking minutes, but I have to leave.
Okay.
Babysit, and the daughter's going to be leaving, and so I have to get there. I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to leave this early.
No problem, Marty.
Okay.
Al Gerber, you want to take it away on redistricting? Do we still have Al with us? Well, I don't know what happened to Al. Sorry about that. It looks like Al's not with us. So we're going to close out the meeting then. This concludes our program for this month. December 4th will be our next meeting. Right now, we have no scheduled topics for the coming months. Does anyone have any topics that they would like to see addressed in coming months? Susan?
Redistricting.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, so just a comment. I did listen into the redistricting meeting on the county this week. And it was incredibly sad experience.
Why is that, Don?
Function. The inability of people to agree on anything. So, I just, if you get a chance to listen in on one of those sessions.
Okay, let me mention that there's a schedule on some redistricting meetings that are coming up. Don't ask me all the specifics. Maybe you know. Dawn?
I got it. There's one on Monday, November 8th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Grants View Library.
No, sorry. I believe that's been superseded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I put that out to our MOPAG at Google Groups, and then shortly thereafter there was another email that came out
Oh, it's in the St. Louis County Chamber.
that said that I believe these are going virtual now, and there was some changes to the times and schedule and the dates. So
Mhm.
that will be, and I sent that out to MOPAG at Google Groups. So for those who are interested in those redistricting meetings, you can check your MOPAG mail tomorrow. And Geneva, I can send that to you as well.
Yes,
That's my
please.
understanding. They went to virtual sessions. So okay. Well, I think in the future also we're going to have to start addressing the 2nd congressional district and that race through having well, a number of different things. Having the candidates on for one thing, and also what we're going to gear up to do. So, all right. Any other topics or anything else anybody wants to add before I sign off? Okay. Thank you all for coming. I thought it was a good session on a pretty challenging topic, but I appreciate everybody's input. All right. Take care all. All right, and this will be posted to mopag.net. That is, the video recording of the session will be posted to mopag.net, mopag.net in the next few days, unless I'm out of town on travel. So, all right, take care.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
also,
everybody.
Yeah.
one of my friends is on the redistricting committee, and she thinks that they're both in person and on Zoom, but she's checking right now.
Okay.
Yes, I'll email you. Also, I promise I'm not half as contrary in real life. Like, I was just playing devil's advocate today. I swear I'm usually much more agreeable, and I don't usually show up very late to these meetings and then come in with a hot take. So yeah,
That's
thank you for all
okay.
bearing with me.
That's fine. We're here to get a lot of different views,
Thank you guys.
not to
Here.
be a choir. Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Take care all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.